Well, hey friends, Joe Sengel here, and I have the privilege of leading INJOY Stewardship Solutions. That's right, that's the organization that was founded over 30 years ago by noted pastor and leadership teacher and author, Dr. John Maxwell. And I'm joined here by our head of marketing, Craig Fatt.
Hello, hello. Good to see you.
We're here to talk about a topic that is right now relevant, and that is called tariffs. And tariffs are a big word these days. And we want to talk about how these tariffs could have an impact on your church, and what you need to know, what you probably need to know. And no, we're not going to tell you how this all ends, because if anybody's telling you exactly how tariffs works out, they are totally guessing. But we want to talk about how this could impact your church and help equip you to have solid conversations with your faith family and with those that are around you, especially if you're facing a project, and this it could be a big impact. And so kind of lead us off in this conversation, maybe about 20 minutes, get that pen, get that paper together. And I think you're going to hear a few things that'll be very helpful to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think, like Joe said, these tariffs, the reason we wanted to have this conversation is because one, this isn't just an economic issue that we're having to navigate through. It also, for pastors and church leaders, becomes a ministry issue. Okay, what does that mean with our church budget? What does that mean? What will our people potentially experience? And I think, to your point, that's a big part of this is we don't know what's going to happen in 6 months, in 3 months, and next week. But we do have an idea of, okay, this is potentially what churches could face.
Right.
And so I think as a pastor, being able to hear, okay, here are the potential things. Let's have our church be prepared for what that could do and what we need to what we need to do to take next steps to make sure that we're ready for whatever could potentially.
Yeah, and I love this verse. Proverbs 21:5 says, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty." And so we're going to help you be diligent, pastor, church leader. And so define tariffs. Let's define them.
Yeah, let's know. To understand what tariffs are, effectively taxes imposed on goods that are imported from other countries.
That's right.
So when countries respond with tariffs of their own, it can create a trade war, and then you have this and that and that. But essentially for us, what churches are going to experience is there's taxes imposed on goods that are coming outside of the United States.
And the executive branch, the president, has the authority to impose tariffs or remove tariffs. And so the United States, through the executive branch, has implemented very broad tariffs. I think the broadest form, every country in the planet has a tariff on them.
Yeah.
And has cranked up, as we speak here, tit for tat tariffs with China. And it's affected everything. It affects all the way to the core of raw materials like aluminum, fuel, steel, lumber, grain costs. So the so-called commodities. And so that affects everything. And that cost, when the cost of goods are increased, well, that causes the price of those goods to go up, and it affects everybody. And so it's important to understand, pastor, church leader, that this affects consumer confidence. And consumer confidence can affect every area of our life, including generosity. People, when they have a lack of clarity, they tend to become, what shall we say, more fearful. God has got Prince of Peace, not of fear, but people tend to, in their human nature, to be fearful and kind of store up for themselves. And as a result, that can really create a challenge to the budgets of churches and for any giving initiatives.
Yeah.
Now, let's share some key stats with everybody right now.
So we did some research and trying to find out, okay, what does this mean then exactly? What do researchers think it's going to mean? What do they think it's going to mean for people, for percentage of increase, things like that? So these are some numbers that we got in doing some research. So they're estimating that tariffs will have an estimated increase of about $4,400 in extra expenses per U.S. household. So that's one thing. So households, they think, are going to have to spend more money. Prices on construction, so if your church is thinking about building or renovating, are expected to go up 30 to 40% from pre-2020 levels.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And then also just, grocery store costs are expected to rise 4 to 7%. So these, again, to be clear, these are estimations of things that could happen. They haven't happened right now.
And it's based on what is known at this time.
Exactly.
And things change. It's a dynamic thing. And so we encourage you to stay tuned. There's some excellent websites where you can keep information in front of you. Finance.yahoo.com is an excellent website. Another one is CNBC. CNBC is the business unit of NBC that really goes down the middle of the line and kind of keeps a lot of the political side of it out of it. So those are two places that you can get data, the most current information on tariffs. And so let's help you understand what this means for your church's health. And the first thing we want to talk about is building and capital projects. We here at INJOY Stewardship Solutions, we of course are known for leading capital campaigns,
Right.
and that's a big part of this. So let's unpack what that means for building and capital projects.
Right. Well, going back to the numbers, one of the things we mentioned is, okay, if there's an anticipated increase of building materials going up, potentially 30 to 40%. I mean, what does that mean? If your project was originally going to be 1 million, there's potential that in 6 to 12 months, it could actually be 1.3 million. I mean, that's a real potential thing. So what does that mean for your church right now? Okay, so that's one thing to think about. The other thing is even small repairs, right? Like roofing, HVAC, lighting, anything technology based, right?
Right.
Well,
anything that's an imported good.
Right. That's also going to be that. So if your church is thinking about renovating, you have AV and tech upgrades and things, there is a potential that the price increase, the cost in a certain period of time, again, we're guessing on some level, 6 months could jump. And so what does that mean that your church should do now? And I think that's where, INJOY could potentially be help. It's like, okay, if I know the cost is this, but it could potentially be this, what should our church do?
Yeah.
Right. I think some pastors are maybe sitting.
So one of the things to think about to consider is watch what the cost of living does for your staff, because you may need to make some cost of living adjustments for their salaries to keep pace with this. A 3 to 4% raise may be the bare minimum to keep up with the inflation should this trade war continue to languish. Now, again, none of this is guaranteed. None of this is certain. It is dynamic and in flux. But, when we think about budgeting, it's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about people. It's about our staff. It's about our parishioners, and people are being impacted. And so we want to talk about the impact on your staff, but we also want to talk about this impact on your faith family, your congregation. Higher living expenses, well, that strips away any margin. And a lot of families had no margin in the first place.
Right.
So that's a big challenge.
Right. And there's a major psychological effect too, because there's, like you mentioned, our God is a God of peace, but that doesn't mean there are moments of fear, right?
Yeah.
And I think, not to harp too much on, tariffs are scary, what's going to happen? But there's a reality that people are seeing, well, prices could go up. And maybe if they already feel like their budget is tight, well, what is the church's place as, pastoral leaders? What can we do to help people and be able to say, hey, I understand you might be feeling that. Let's go to the Bible and see what it says, and here are next steps you can take. So that's another thing to be thinking about as a pastor and church leader okay, what can our church do to help provide these people peace and practical next steps when it comes to their personal finances?
Right. And we also think it's important that it is in this place that it's excellent to be able to provide financial education and to speak to it. Don't ignore it as if it's not happening, because what some people may call fear, others might call prudence. Right. Say it makes sense for us to dial things back across the board during a time of flux and uncertainty. And so the pastoral implications here is we really encourage you to think about having counseling available, because this will increase financial anxiety, stress. It will also could potentially cause an increase in the need for benevolence. And it could also, it needs to be a moment when we recognize as church leaders that we're shepherds. We're not just fundraisers, right? And we care for people's hearts, for their families, not just so that we hope they keep giving. And so this is a call to leadership to say, people, they're looking for confidence, they're looking for competence, and they're looking for the rock. And we know the rock.
Right.
And we can build a life upon that. And so this is this is a moment when the church can shine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this can also affect outreach.
Yeah, well, it could be a major effect to outreach. So you effectively have three kind of main areas as if you're a pastor and church leader to be considering and thinking about how does this impact these three. So one is obviously your church operations, like what's our budget,
Staff,
staff,
utilities,
what are we doing internally?
maintenance,
Right.
projects.
So you have that core group. Okay, how does this impact that? Number two is the people in your church,
Our faith family.
our faith family. How are they going to be impacted? What can we do to help provide them with knowledge, content, and help them take next steps? And then third, what is our church doing in our community and outside of our community? So
Yeah.
when you talk about global missions, that traveling, again, any overseas things that you guys are being a part of, that's certainly going to be something you need to be thinking about. What does this do to that?
Right.
Any sort of missionary expenses. Also, just partnerships are going to matter more than ever. Collaborating with other churches, food banks, local nonprofits, helping stretch the resources of other organizations. And I do want to be clear that, again, a lot of this is us trying to look at things that we don't know what are going to happen. It could be positive. It could be negative. We're just trying to figure out how could a church maybe experience these things, and then have a conversation about, well, what can we do then to make the best right next step for the people in the church and outside the church.
Right. And so let's just talk about some aspects of this, church leader. And pardon me if I become a little bit of a nerd here for a minute, but
It's okay.
there is a massive trade imbalance, particularly between the U.S. and China. It is also in place with the neighboring countries in the North American continent, and also with the European Union. And what has happened is there's been an outsourcing of jobs from the United States systematically over the last 40 years, accelerated by NAFTA. And as a result, there has been a known and documented shrinking of the so-called middle class. And so those who have gotten a lot more, and then there's a lot more of the have-nots. And so part of this, at least the impetus behind it, is to try to balance that out, so that we can get the debt under control. It is a method to get the national debt under control, which is indeed out of control. And it's really also kind of an activity at some level to reduce interest rates. Because if you can shrink demand, which increase in prices shrinks demand,
Right.
if you shrink demand, there's something called the quantity theory of money. And the quantity theory of money says that if demand goes down, then the supply of money goes down. If the supply of money goes down, then therefore inflation will go down. And as a result, interest rates will go down. Why? To get money supply increased again, right? Cheaper money means more people would want it. And so part of what I believe is happening with the executive branch is they're trying to drive down interest rates, because the number one expense in the United States budget is not defense. It is the interest being paid on the national debt.
Mm-hmm.
And that a bunch of that debt, like $8 trillion of it, is getting ready to be rewritten. They want to get it rewritten at much lower interest rates. So I think it's a play that way as well. So what is happening? Shrinking demand to dry up money supply so the interest rates get driven down. I believe that's what's happening. And that's certainly going to happen if they continue to crank prices and tariffs.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, that's Joe nerding out for a minute. I appreciate bearing with it. Appreciate bearing with it, church leader. But let's talk about what pastors that are joining us right now, what can they do? Let's do this for like 3 minutes, 4 minutes. What is the 1, 2, 3 that they could do right now?
Right. So I think the first thing is potentially revising your budget. A lot of you probably did your budget in the
Last October.
last October, and you had a good plan, and it seemed really good.
Working.
It's working great. And now you're like, we might have to shift this. And don't do any dramatic shifts again, because we're trying to figure it out. But it's probably worth looking, be like, okay, do we need to maybe bump this up 5%?
Yeah. Do we not need to dial back some spending for a little
100%.
bit? What does it look like? And, you don't even have to enact it, but it
Right.
is prudent, because the plans of the diligent lead to profit,
Right.
to kind of rework that and have plan B Plan B is always good.
Yep.
Okay. What's the second thing they could do?
Prioritize your ministry essentials. So focus on the core mission of the church. What is your church? What is your focus going to be? This is a good time to just relook at that stuff, right? Because we're having these conversations now.
Yes.
If we're going to go back and revise our budget, and again, to your point, we don't mean just change everything. We're just saying look and plan. It's good to be able to focus and say, okay, well, what is our ministry focus going to be?
Yeah. Which is worship, discipleship, your community service efforts, missions. And maybe there's some nice to have projects that were in the budget. Maybe press that pause button for 2, 3, 4 months.
Yeah.
Right. Just press the pause button, not the stop button,
Right.
but the pause button so that you can hit play, when things settle out, which I believe that this will all be resolved within the next 3 to 4 months by and large. The market hates unanswered questions and uncertainty more than anything. I believe there's going to be some certainty.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we can also equip your people. Focus on, hey, are there financial classes? Could you launch their I Was Broke, Now I'm Not group study?
Right.
Offer fully funded life at fullyfunded.life. Get them the resources and tools in their hands and remind them that faithfulness in giving is one of the ways that gets the attention of a holy God. And really, remind them that he is Jehovah Jireh, our great provider. And I would also say, strengthen your benevolent system. If this continues on and carries on at the level that it is, the need for financial assistance and food assistance can go up. So, what are a couple of practical things you could do to boost that?
Well, I think one thing is just to communicate with transparency with your people. I think being able to communicate from stage through emails, through whatever your church does to communicate to your people, just be transparent. Hey,
Yeah.
prices are going up. Are you feeling that? Hey, well, here's things that we have. Hey, our church is doing this. Our church is doing whatever those things are. Even letting people know, hey, we're revising our budget because we want to make sure we're planning what we have.
And you need to recognize that the word tariff itself has become political.
Right.
The word Doge has become political. Acknowledge that those two words are causing people to feel things and avoid the political side, but instead speak to the here's what our church is doing in response side. Because ignoring it, well, that's ignoring reality and not helping people navigate their daily Christian walk. And so by bringing it up and talking about this, there's some statements, that we would like to say that tariffs may feel like, hey, that's a President Trump thing. That's a Washington, D.C. thing. It's a Wall Street thing. It's for rich people. But for pastors, it's a Main Street issue. It's our congregation issue. And it has potential to affect your budget. It's got the potential to affect one, if not all of your people, and your ability to minister effectively in your community. And so we've done something to help pastors, and we've created a free ebook. Tell everybody about that.
Yeah, so we, like I said, at the top of this, we did some research where we got some ideas about, okay, this is what the potential increase could be, assuming these things happen the way that they're being talked about, and trying to get the numbers from real sources and real people and real research that can help you as a pastor say, okay, if that is what is potentially going to happen, then what does our church need to do? And so we put together a document where you can go and look that's going to kind of expand on what we talked about, which, in the reality are highlights, right? This is just main points. But we went a little bit deeper and said, okay, well, let's take that point and go down and say, well, what are the 5 things a pastor could do with this, this? And so we've put that resource together, and you can access it right now.
Right. There's a link. Click it, fill it out. We'll get it sent to you immediately. And we just want you to know that INJOY Stewardship Solutions was founded by Dr. Maxwell to be a friend to pastors. And we heard this happening, and we see that this is something that's affecting a lot of church leaders. And we wanted to put some information in your hands that will help you right now. And we want to remind you, God is our great provider. This too shall pass. And we want to see your vision fully funded. Thanks for joining us, and make sure you download that resource. If you have any feedback, we would love to hear that from you as well. God bless each of you.